everyone, today I have my hands on the new Lumix 24-60mm f2.8. We're going to be testing this lens out on location at a real-world portrait photo shoot for both photo and video, so let's get started. I try and get like a shot with the roses. I think it would be cool if you stand like here-ish. If you're going to come as close as you can to the flowers. That looks so cool. This Lumix S 24-60mm is a full-frame lens with a constant aperture of f2.8. It's a standard zoom lens with 10mm missing on the long end, most likely to keep the size of this lens on the small side. Typically, you'll see this style of lens with a focal range of 24-70 or 28-75, but Lumix have decided to go with 24-60. So do you need this extra 10mm when you're at a photo shoot? Will you notice it missing when you're out taking photos? I will be taking a look at and talking about that in today's video. So I'm going to be using this lens on the full frame Lumix S1R2, so we have some nice high-res images to take a look at the quality of this lens. I'll be sharing the unedited photos first at 100% crop so you can see the actual quality of this lens, and afterwards the edited version of the photo. I edited the first half of the shoot with a new preset I've been working on for the past few months, and then the other half of the shoot with my Havana preset, which I admit I have been using a lot lately. Now that you've seen a few of the images we've been taking, let's start off with image quality. My first impressions of this lens is that it produces beautiful images. There is a good level of sharpness and clarity to this lens where you can see more than enough details in the photo. I like that when you zoom in to 100%, you can see all that detail in her iris, and you can see plenty of skin texture as well. This lens has a nice balance between being sharp but also looking flattering for photos of people. We'll talk about this a bit more when we get to bokeh, but I do like the smooth background to foreground separation you can get out of this lens, even with it being f2.8. The colors are super rich and realistic straight out of the camera, which we also partially have the S1R2 to thank for, and they were very easy to work with in post. Paired with the S1R2, this lens is pretty reliable in terms of autofocus when using it out on location. As you can see from the picture-in-picture, IAF is super sticky on my subject regardless of what focal length I'm using and what we're doing in the frame. Out of the photos I captured, a good majority of them had critical focus on the iris, with only a few photos here and there with slightly missed focus. So all in all, I did find the focus ratio from this lens to be quite good. I had no problems capturing all the photos I needed during this photo shoot. As usual, I have a sequence of consecutive close-up portraits I took, so you can take a look at the autofocus performance for yourself. I also have my usual AF test in video mode where Dan and I run around towards the end of this review when we take a look at this lens for video, so make sure you stick around to watch that. I know at f2.8 you obviously have a bit more leeway when it comes to critical focus compared to an f1.8 prime, but regardless, from my experience using it, I can safely say this lens performs great on the S1R2. If it rains harder, we can sit in the car and like wait it out so we don't get wet. I'm getting a pretty wide shot here. If you wanted to like, maybe you can have your arms kind of up. Yeah, cool. This 24-60 f2.8 weighs 544 grams, and I would say this is one of the most attractive things about this lens. You are getting some great image quality in such a small package, which means it would be nice to use this for long days of shooting and for traveling with. This lens features external zoom, it has a zoom ring and a focus ring. There is an AF to MF switch, one focus hold button, and that's it. A couple of other things to note: it has a 77mm filter thread, weather sealing, and a minimum focus distance of 33 centimeters on the long end and 19 centimeters on the wide end. This lens has 9 circular aperture blades, and the bokeh it produces is very clean and round. I also really like the separation produced by this lens. The out of focus area in the background is nice and smooth, there's no weird textures happening. There is also a nice smooth out of focus transition, so in these photos right here, if you keep an eye on Saskia's cheek and jawbone to ear area where it goes from sharp to out of focus, you can see just how smooth that is. These are all great things to see in a lens, especially if you're
considering using it for portraits. If you have that texture in the bokeh, then it can look a bit distracting and take away from the person in the frame. The bokeh starts to produce sharper edges from around f5 and onwards, and at higher apertures you can also see more texture in the bokeh. This 24-60 has a really good handle on chromatic aberration. If you zoom in and really look for it, you can see a tiny amount of purple fringing. For me personally, that's pretty negligible though.
It's like a dream.
Okay, so there is quite a lot going on here when it comes to lens flares, so let's take a good look. For the most part, I really enjoy the flares this lens produces. Most of them are quite soft with no defined edges, so it makes it really easy to incorporate into your photos. I do not like sterile and perfect lenses, so for me, having a unique and fun lens flare is such a positive. I was able to find little rainbows, which look awesome. There was a cool, soft purple hazing lens flare that also popped up during our photo shoot. It does have more defined shapes to the flare as well. Sometimes they look fine and are not too drastic. Other times these flares are very defined, so they can potentially be distracting in your photos. Pretty much the only flare I wasn't a big fan of is this big sunstar ghosting kind of flare that takes up a big portion of the frame. This one is a bit too large in my opinion. Overall though, I think this lens does great with flaring for a zoom. Let's take a look at some comparisons. Currently, Lumix have their S Pro 24-70 f2.8 and also the Sigma 24-70 f2.8, so those would be your main considerations if you're looking for a standard zoom. While you lose 10mm on the long end, this lens is quite small and definitely much lighter than the other two options, which I think is its standout feature in comparison. I use this 24-60 a lot while traveling through Oregon for photos. I had it clipped on my camera bag during long hikes and had it on me pretty much all day, every day, and it never got inconvenient or felt heavy, so I did really enjoy traveling with it. I personally don't think the 10mm at the end would have made a world of a difference. Anytime I needed to capture something with a longer focal length, I used my 70-200 at the 100mm or longer end anyway. If anything, I was after a slightly wider field of view sometimes, so I wonder if it would have been worth starting this lens out at 20mm instead to make up for the lack of long end. I find the 20-60 kit lens has a great focal range that could double up for vlogging since it starts at 20. This lens could have potentially been the pro version of that with a faster aperture, however, you would then be sacrificing size and weight at that point again. So at the end of the day, I do think this lens is light enough to be a good competitor against these pre-existing all-rounder zooms. Let me know your thoughts about this in the comments.
So I'm going to take a photo at all the main focal lengths of this lens and put them up side by side so you can see the focal range. So I'm going to start off here on the widest at 24mm, and then I'll zoom into 28, then we have 35, next is 40, then we have 50, and finally 60. And I'm going to do that again, but this time I'm going to move around to frame each of the focal lengths to look the same. So I'm going to start off on 60 instead.
Finally, we have some video to take a look at. I have some autofocus tests for you that Dan and I filmed on the S1 II in standard picture profile, and I also have handheld shots Dan captured of Saskia, also using the S1 II but in Vlog. In all these tests, we are completely relying on human AF to keep focus on the subject, so we had the camera set to responsive, continuous human AF in full area mode. Just like photo, this lens looks great for video as well. It is producing some seriously beautiful results here. We have nice sharpness where you can see plenty of details, the out of focus area is super smooth, the bokeh looks nice, and the colors look great overall. I am using my own custom Rec 709 conversion light, and I've only adjusted white balance and exposure to keep the footage as close to straight out of the camera as possible for you. This lens does not have any optical image stabilization, so you will be relying on the IBIS of the camera you're using it on. It does a great job at keeping focus while zooming, and there is also very minimal focus breathing on both ends of the focal range. I think it's safe to say that this lens is a great option for either stills shooters or videographers, as it performed really well for us in both areas while we were testing it out.
That is all I have for today's review on this lens. Let me know what you think of it in the comments and which ones are your favorite photos, and don't forget to check out my review of the S1 II as well. I'll leave that link down below. But thank you so much for watching. I make new videos every single week, so I'll see you all next time. Bye.